He had spent all. Not only, yeah, he wasted it all, and didn't have any left. He was a complete wastrel here. Pretty bad what he did. When he spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him to the fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. Now listen to this. This is very interesting in verse 17. When he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father have enough bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? Now listen to this. He said when he came to himself, he started thinking about the servants of his father. Do you realize that this son who went and wasted his father's living was still the son of his father? Did you see that? He didn't lose his sonship. He didn't lose his relationship. But I'll tell you what, he was living in a pig pen. He didn't lose his relationship to his father, but he was experiencing misery and experiencing a pig pen. Now, the consequences for living a wasteful and a riotous life of I can do anything I want to do and there's no consequences, you always end up in a pig pen. Now, as for me, on the one hand, I could live in the Father's house, in close fellowship and relationship with the Father, enjoying everything that the Father has, or I can go do it my way and end up in a pig pen. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a pig pen or not. Have anybody ever seen a pig pen? You ever seen how they live? It's a mess, and it smells bad. Now, we don't get the smell here from reading this. We have to use our imagination. Pigs are nasty, and they smell bad. I don't want to live in a pig pen, do you? No, he said he was in so much want that he wanted to eat what the pigs are eating. Here's another question. You ever seen pigs, what they eat? You know what they call what pigs eat? Slop. Yeah. It's all the waste products. It's like scraping out the bottom of the garbage disposal. Now, you got to be pretty seriously hungry to want to eat the slop that the pigs are eating. It smells bad. It's garbage. It's, just nasty stuff. Like sometimes when our city workers, and thank God that they're willing to do that, go down the alley and, the trash bags, and sometimes in their delicate care of the trash bag, they tear open and all the trash spills out in the alley. And in their concern for cleanliness of outlet, you just drive on and leave it there. And I've found the products of the trash cans out in my alley sometimes, from time to time. Not always. And I'll tell you what, just getting a look at that, I go and pick it up because I don't want to have to drive over it and see it, and I don't even like to touch it. But imagine how bad off you've got to be to want to eat that. That's the slop. This guy wanted to eat he is in bad situation. Now guess what? The Father didn't put him in that situation. It was not the Father's will. The Father didn't want him. When he asked for the Father's, he said, divide your living. Don't you think the Father knew what was going on? Don't you think the Father had enough smarts to know he was going to go out and what was going on here? Did you notice the Father didn't chase him down the road, threatening him, waving his fist in the air? I'll tell you what, you're not my son anymore, and I'm going to see to it that you end up in a pig pen. He didn't have to do that. He didn't do that. That's not the Father's attitude. The consequences of his own choices led him to a pig pen. But here's the good news. When he came to himself, and what does that mean? When his thinking, something dawned on him, and he remembered, I am the son of my Father. And in my Father's house, even the servants have enough food to spare. They're not eating slop in the pig pen. It dawned on him. He realized what he had done and who he was. And it says, when he came to himself, he said, my Father's servants have enough to spare, and I am perishing with hunger. Verse 18, he gets an idea. I will arise and go to, notice, my Father. Now, he doesn't say, I will go to this man who used to be my father to see if we can make some kind of... He said he knew he was still his father. Did you see that? He didn't lose what he had. Now, see, this is the answer to Christians who say, no, don't say we're secure. Unless people feel a threat of being thrown into hell and losing their salvation, they won't live right. No, the motivation to live a serious, sober kind of life is we don't want to live in a pig pen. Isn't that good enough? I don't like living in a pig. You need to soberly consider what it'd be like to live in a pig pen. I don't want to live in a pig pen. Do you think, see what was really dawning on him was, in my Father's house, somehow I got the wrong idea that there was something out here away from the Father that would be desirable for me. And really the only thing out here away from the Father is it ends up in a pig pen. I should have just stayed in the Father's house where I had everything I needed, you see. Anyway, here's what he says. I will arise, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. You see how his attitude has changed. He has a lot of humility now. He's very self-deprecating. I am no more worthy to be called thy son. You see, this is his attitude. I have not acted like a son. But he says, nevertheless, he's my father. But I have not acted in a way worthy of being your son. He said, I'll tell you what you do, just let me be like your hired servants. And he arose, and he came to his father. It's a wise thing that he did here. Now notice this. When he was yet a great way off, his father saw him. Now listen to this. Had compassion on him. Didn't say he had anger for him. He said he had compassion. And he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. Now Jesus is telling this story. You understand this is not a true story about real people. This is a made-up story. Now the reason I say that to you is you have to understand Jesus made up this story so that he could illustrate what the character of the Father is in relation to us. See, Jesus is making this up. He could have said anything he wanted here. But he's making up this story and putting these characteristics on the Father to show us this is what the Father is really like. This is what God's attitude really is like. He ran, it says. Man, that's an image of God that we don't often have. It said he had compassion. He ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. That's the Father's attitude towards it. And not just, us sitting in church reading the Bible. That's the Father's attitude towards somebody who's lived in the pig pen and who comes to himself and says, I'm going to rise and go to my Father. He didn't say, I'm going to give you what's coming to you. You're going to have to pay for that. Boy, I'll tell you what, you used to be my son, but you're not anymore. No, none of that. None of that. See, the Father didn't put him in the pig pen. He put himself in the pig pen. And his separation from the Father was only in his mind. It was all his doing. But when the Father saw him turn and come toward him, he ran to meet him. That's the Father's attitude. And he kissed him. That's the kind of love he has. And the Son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Now, if you remember a few verses before, there was more to this speech. But the Father said to his servants, see, the Father didn't even let him finish this little speech he had worked out. The Father interrupted and said to the servants, bring forth the best robe. Not the worst one, but the best one. Put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf and kill it, and let's eat and make merry. Be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. Now that's good. The son is returned, and the father's happy. Everybody's happy. But the elder son, it says verse 25, was in the field. And as he drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said, thy brother is come. Thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And listen to this. This second son here, he was angry and would not go in. Therefore, the father came out and entreated him. See, the father is always going to meet these sons here. The father came out and begged him, in other words, entreated him. And he answered and said to his father, listen to this attitude. I can just hear the tone of voice. Lo, these many years I've served thee. Oh, God, I've served you. All about me. See? Now, I have served thee. Neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. You see the self-centeredness and the pride and all these negative attitudes. This story is not really about one son who got separated from his father. It's about two sons who were both separated from their father. This one was putting on a good show, but in his mind, he was no more in fellowship with the father than the other son. He was totally separated from the Father in his own thinking. But he had this holier-than-thou, self-righteous attitude. But as soon as this thy son was come, he won't even admit that he's his brother. Thy son, which hath devoured thy living with harlots. That always makes me laugh when I read that, because having read the whole story as we did this morning, I never read anywhere about harlots in that story. Did you notice that? Nowhere in that story do we read about harlots. But here they come up for the first time in the mind of the second son, which tells me that it was all in his. He was imagining all these things that